Thank you very much for inviting me tonight. Before I start, can I say on a personal note, I feel very honoured that the Centre for Liberal Studies bears the name of my father, Mark Kumbus, who is one of the rare voices of liberalism in Greece, I think. And if you're alive, I think you'd be very proud of the work you guys are doing to promote liberal ideas in this country. At the same time, despite his characteristic optimistic take on life, I feel he could only be frustrated by the fact that these ideas and debates we're having now, they're not being replicated in Parliament, they're not being debated on television, in the media, and they still remain very much on the fringe here in Greece. There's something that has to change for this country to move forward. We've seen some encouraging evidence recently that the Greek mindset is starting to shift towards a more liberal direction. And this could be partially due to the fact that more and more of us are working abroad in countries with free markets and pro-business mentality. And this is why the brain drain, as I may be saying things again, and Gregory's speech more or less covers what I said, but the brain drain and immigration generally, I think, has many positive aspects to it. All these young people working abroad, they're picking up valuable experience, structured training in global companies, working with people from all over the world, where they can put their skills to work in a meritocratic environment. They're living in countries with proper institutions, legal, tax and justice systems, with user-friendly public administrations, with governments that respect their citizens. All these people at some point will want to come back and work in Greece. And also, something which is very important in my opinion, they will demand and vote for a better class of politician. The movement of people is something no government should ever dare restrict. To borrow an analogy from financial markets, which is my background, if you try and restrict financial capital to within your own borders, bad things generally happen. The same is absolutely true for human capital. In Greece, given the structure and makeup of the economy, there are very few opportunities for young people who are straight out of college. Youth unemployment is 60%, and overall unemployment is close to 30%. And these are tragic numbers for a developed country. It shouldn't be the case that there is more work available for low-skilled immigrants than for people with college degrees. We can't all work for the government, we can't all start up our own business and be our own boss. There has to be a middle option between the ultra-high risk and the zero risk. The truth is, there is no Greek Apple or Microsoft, and there is unlikely to be one for a very long time. So in the meantime, we need medium and large global companies to come here, set up shop here, employ and train people, and we need to lay out the red carpet for them. So it's up to the government to create a business-friendly environment to reverse the brain drain tide. We know what needs to be done. We've been saying this time and time again. Get rid of about 85% of the current state. With the money you save, drastically cut taxes, simplify taxation, liberalize product and labour markets, strengthen institutions and especially the justice system, simplify laws, implement a zero-tolerance strategy on corruption, and cut down on red tape. You also need to encourage local companies to consolidate and grow in size, with perhaps tax incentives for M&A activity and special tax breaks for more employees they hire. Greek companies need to grow bigger. And very importantly, you also need universities to develop their R&D capabilities and to nurture and strengthen their ties with corporations. And this is a European problem, it's not just a Greek problem. In Greece we see the extreme case, I think. There's a study from the 2010 Bruegel policy brief, which I Googled recently, and it says that Europe has fewer YOLIs than the United States. YOLIs are young leading innovators. These are young firms, they're not startups, they're young firms, which have been established after 1975, which in a very short period of time have grown into world leaders with an average 10,000 employees on the back of substantial R&D effort. So firms like Google, Apple, Microsoft, this kind of stuff, Amgen. In the US, 50% of leading innovators are young fellows. In the EU, it is 20%. Also, European yollis, they're far less R&D intensive than their US counterparts. US-based yollis, they have an R&D to sales ratio of 10.2% versus 4.4% for EU yollis. So a reason for this is that there are far fewer EU yollis in the more R&D intensive high-tech biotech sectors. That there are fewer high-tech companies in Europe, basically, is what I'm getting at. Why are there so few? Why? Because the very simple reason that our markets are not free enough. We have a hostile business tax environment, uncooperative state-owned universities that don't accept private funding, and intellectual property rights that are unclear and unaffordable. There also seems to be a lack of early-stage financing opportunities, which in Europe is, early-stage financing in Europe is non-existent. It's much less developed than in the US. Despite all these problems I talked about, I am, believe it or not, very optimistic. Certainly for a reverse of the brain drain in the case of Greece. I think it will reverse, and I think it will reverse very sharply. Over the last, if we want to look at the US, for example, as an example, the US was a major recipient of the brain drain over the last 30 years, primarily because of its competitive advantage versus Europe in terms of infrastructure and in the fields of communication. And also interesting to note is if you look at the internal population movements within the US, both California and to a lesser extent Florida were major recipients of human capital. And do you know why that was? Primarily due to the weather. There is no reason why Athens shouldn't see a huge influx of talented, self-employed tech, finance or other professional businesses from Northern Europe over the coming years. The Greeks we lose to Europe now, or to the US, could be replaced by Europeans coming here. Given the major advances in telecommuting, teleconferencing and the internet, you can choose to live more or less anywhere you want these days. If you're a software developer living in Dortmund, Germany, there's something very wrong with you, I think. All right? Why not live in a city where you're at the most 40 minutes away from some of the most beautiful beaches in the world? Where you're an hour away from a quiet island or a party island or whatever you want. A city which now, after, let's look at what's happened in Greece the last 10 years. It boasts a world-class infrastructure, an excellent climate, quality international schools now, good food, lifestyle, and following the internal devaluation that we've seen over the last 3 or 4 years, it has a huge competitive advantage now with the rest of Europe in terms of cost. Cost of living, cost of rent, pricing, everything. Over the past year or so in my business, I've seen a lot of professionals from my industry set up shop here in Greece, and they love it. I mean, I was born and raised in London, I came over here, and I never want to go back, never. It's one of the easiest ways of Greece to boost both GDP, tax revenue, and employment, all in one go. Getting people to come and live here, work here, retire here, the government should do all it can to encourage this. For example, the large-scale development in the Hellenikon in the future could house hedge funds from London and Zurich, computer programmers from Frankfurt, IT consultants from Paris, and a call center for a UK bank. Greece is not a difficult sell. And this is what someone who's lived in London, Mr. Slam. We need to make sure that all the things I've been saying and all the things we've been hearing tonight, that the message is getting through to people, I think. That it's getting through to voters, it's getting through to political parties, it's getting through to government. The truth is that the interests of all these groups of people are, at the end of the day, perfectly aligned. The goal is wealth and job creation and prosperity. The old ways of getting around here, getting ahead of patronage, pandering to vested interests, crony capitalism, waiting for government contracts. This era has passed, it's finished. Nobody will fund this anymore. Not the European Union, not investors, nothing. It's over. And this realization has to come sooner or later. Pure necessity, I think, will force it through at some point. The most important thing is to sort out the politics here. As Gregory said, the politics is the key to this. If we sort that out, everything else will fall into place very quickly, I think. The sooner this change comes, the sooner people go through this mentality shift, the sooner governments understand that they should restrict their roles to overseeing, to speeding up investments, the sooner I think we can start building a country that will create opportunities and prospects for our youth and our children. Thank you very much.
La Jolla, California is one of the most expensive real estate markets in the world. You could walk to Mexico from La Jolla, California, and be in one of the worst and most corrupt political systems in the world. It's amazing how few people actually walk to Mexico to live. They just don't do it. It matters. This idea of brain drain, I'll just perhaps, because this is the way panels are configured, take a more negative view. It is a serious problem. America has been draining the brains of the rest of the world for 500 years, not for 30. You know, this is a serious issue. My grandparents were raised in Germany, put on a boat, seeking opportunity, and came to the United States, and they planted their flag there. They raised their family there. Right now, I'm invested in about 11 companies, and we've done it many times over the years, and those interests are scattered, but they're all headquartered near me. The reason for that is because I want to be close to the money. I want to be close to my investments. I want to be close to the employees who are running these organizations. We've discovered that when you remotely have people work from home, people want to, but productivity tends to go down. People tend to be more productive when they're encountering their colleagues and working with them on a regular basis. Because of the roadshow, my oldest son's 18th birthday was yesterday. So I Skyped with him and I communicated by video like you do, and my wife had arranged for the routine birthday celebration. It's not the same. It's not the same doing it over Skype as it is being there in person. And so brain drain is a problem that we should be concerned about. As an individual, as somebody who believes strongly in the personal freedom and responsibility, I encourage any person to go and do what is best for them. Absolutely. After the last election in the United States, my 13-year-old son was very concerned and thought the world was coming to an end. I said it isn't, and I felt terribly that we talked about politics too much in front of him, I think, to concern him that way. But I said, you know, I could learn to speak Chinese. I'd be very comfortable if that's the way the world goes. I don't think that it will, but I'm certainly watching. If that were to occur, if the world were to shift in a dramatic way, my grandparents gave me that model. They said you can go somewhere else and learn a new culture and learn a new way, and you can seek opportunity wherever that happens to be, whether the climate is sunny or it snows occasionally, as it did this year in Indiana. I live in the middle of the United States, and in a place that I certainly wouldn't expect any of you to know, because most people from New York and Los Angeles don't know about it either. There are about 7 million people. 100 years ago, we were bankrupt. One of our very entrepreneurial political leaders decided the solution was to build a canal so that we could ship through the state of Indiana. Well, of course, almost immediately we were upside down on the debt. They had built 3 miles of a 400-mile canal. They had overspent the entire budget by 30%, and no one could figure out what was happening. The solution, of course, at the time would have been to borrow from Germany. We just didn't know we could do that. So instead, we went to the federal government, who was likewise bankrupt, and said, we're not giving you any money. So we had to go back to the banks and negotiate a deal. As a part of that agreement, we agreed that we would never be, by Constitution, in debt. So in other words, we prohibited ourselves by Constitution from borrowing money we had to operate on a balanced budget. Well, it's been a very interesting game, as you can imagine, in politics. So about, I guess, 20 years ago, a little more than that, the state of Indiana found itself to be about $8 billion in debt. Well, how do you go into debt when you can't do it by Constitution? You just stop paying your bills. It's a very easy thing to do, frankly. I was surprised. And so government vendors and contracts and hospitals just didn't get paid by the state of Indiana. Well, why was that? What was happening? Well, we'd grown the apparatus of state. We had created incentives. We were spending money on things that again, these entrepreneurial, business-imagined elected officials were spending our money because they thought they were better at it than we are. As somebody who's lived my entire life by investing my own money, by putting my own life at risk and my own family at risk, I don't like the idea that an elected official can come to me and say, I know how to get a better return on your money than you do. It really concerns me tremendously. I'm sure they're very good at other things, but I know that I'm good at creating jobs. I know that I'm good at creating businesses. I know that I'm good at turning a profit, and they haven't proven to me that they are. Well, Indiana found itself in enormous debt and was trying to figure out what to do. The thing I think that's magic here, if there's a single word that I would hope to leave you with, it's the word will. Do the Greek people have the will to do what they need to do? It's not politicians. I love blaming politics. They're us. We are them. You know, government is just us. But do we have the will? Do we have the will? My mother lives with us. My dad's deceased now. Do I have the will to go to her and say, Mom, you really don't need that Social Security check. You don't need it. You live with me. I pay your bills. God, that's going to be a really bad day for me. Until you live with your mother, you just don't know what I'm talking about. I can assure you. My wife and her have come to get some sort of an unholy alliance that whenever they're together and they summon me into a darkened room, I just get out my wallet and say, thank you, I'm sorry. But at any rate, I'm very brave when I'm far away from home. Barbara Cohen knows my wife, and my mother for that matter. But at any rate, so Indiana decided, for reasons that are still kind of unknown to me, I'm not sure I believe that we had the will to do it, that it was time to stop not paying our bills. We elected a different kind of leader. And the leaders in this particular instance did something that I thought was really unusual. They elected to not expand government, which is what we've all been taught to do by, I think, thoughtless economists. You know, whenever we're out of money, we should spend more. This sounds like something that my kids would say to me. I need more money, Dad, because I spent all the money I had. It just doesn't make a lot of sense, but we do it regularly. So instead, we looked at what could we do. We identified the few things that Indiana was particularly good at. Motorsports, agriculture. You know, these are things that I think anyone can figure out if you've even flown over Indiana. There isn't a lot of other things going on there. But we had the most significant job losses in the U.S. during the same period of time. We were largely a manufacturing state. So we retooled that manufacturing. And how we did it is we went out and we sold it to people. We just worked harder. We listened to what people were saying. We flew to Japan, we flew to Germany, we flew to places where we were losing competitively and said, what do you need us to do to be more competitive? What customers, how could we become your customer? The other way around, how could you become our customer? As opposed to going out with a model that said, here's what we do, you should buy it. We spent a year or so just going out to find out what it was that was preventing people from doing business with us in the areas where we had expertise already. Well, what happened then is the thing that I think I'm most proud of, and look it up on the web, and we'll see whether we can hold on to it or not, but we reduced the size of government. We actually spent less. We went back into the agencies and said, you're spending too much money. The outcomes are not good enough for the amount of money you're spending. Make yourself smaller. There was outrage, and you can imagine government employees were very unhappy, and there was a moment of pain. This is why elected officials have a life cycle, I suppose. But then beyond that, we began to retool in such a way that we were accommodating the customers that we wanted. And it's been surprising what's occurred over a period of years. Just this week, as we were here, General Electric and a large French company announced the building of a $100 million jet engine manufacturing facility, a new manufacturing facility. The United States is a very expensive place to manufacture anything, much like I assume it would be here to manufacture things. So why is that plant being built in Indiana instead of in Seattle where Boeing is, or instead of China where everything else is, or instead of Mexico where the labor is a third of the price? Well, because of something I think that echoes what's been said up here already. Purdue University, a major asset, but for years had really created ideas and written dissertations, and they'd gone on a stack in a professor's closet, and that's where they sat. So years ago, as Indiana began to think of itself in a different way, they urged and pushed to birth some of these ideas into companies. Then the university out-licensed them. They make money off of this. This is a good thing, in spite of what many of the academics thought that somehow would pollute the world if there was an idea that might in fact be profitable or help people. And those businesses have grown. And now what's happened over the years is that there's venture capital has been attracted to those businesses. And they were there because that's where the families were and that's where people lived. Not because the ocean was there or because it was a particularly attractive place. It is not, I assure you. But it's where people lived. It's amazing where people will live when they think that that's where they're from, that they're vested in these places. If you leave for 15 years or you leave for 5 years, you become vested in a different place. So what kept people in this specific geographic area was the fact that they believed, as young people, that they had vertical opportunity, that they could grow their business, that they could live in this place, and they could stay there and see what happened. And because other things occurred, that worked. So when GE was looking for a location, they wanted a vibrant place where they could steal employees or trade employees or get other ideas. And so the incentives that were offered, I find this very amusing. It was about, all in, it's under $5 million, which is 5% of the deal. About $1.5 million of that is infrastructure. And what the state of Indiana does is it takes its infrastructure dollars and it requires its communities to bid for those dollars. So you have to apply to the state to say, I've got a better opportunity than you do. And so then the opportunity, the way to invest those dollars is based on what the opportunity is. I don't like the idea that the state takes those tax dollars at all, but if they have to, at least that's better than saying, I like you better, so therefore you get the money. The next little chunk of it was retraining. That retraining dollars is essentially taking people who used to work in automobile manufacturing companies and attempting to retrain them to apply for these jet manufacturing jobs. I have some concern about that. The thing I like is it's cheaper than unemployment, which in the United States now is out of control for a variety of ways, but that's another session. But the incentives that came from the state was a very small percent, about 2% of the total deal, and they're only guaranteed if the company actually hits its objectives. So in other words, those incentives are only received if the company actually earns them. In other words, there has to be more tax dollars coming in than the incentives that are going out. The thing about this that's most interesting is other states, like California, that we've already pointed to, offer significantly more money, $20, $30 million, because they believe that cash incentives were the way to get things fixed, the way to make things happen. Over the years, I've had loads of employees, and especially among young people, I've learned that cash is not the motivator that we imagine it to be. Can you make their life better? Can you give them an opportunity to grow into a bigger job? Can you give them respect? Can you include them in decision making? Can you make them believe that they've got the freedom to live the life they want to live? That is way more often more important than giving somebody a bonus check. Bonus checks are nice. Paying people fairly is very important. But we have no difficulty in recruiting talent. They come to us because they see the people that are already there. They understand that those people are no better than them, but they've achieved because the opportunities were available, and somebody just had to take them. I guess as a final sentence, I truly believe that incentives are as dangerous as disincentives. Trying to corral people's behavior by saying, I will whip you if you do this, or I'll give you a cookie if you do this, is a fairly bad way to parent. I think most of us would agree. The idea is to teach your children to help people learn how to be competitive and how to enjoy that on their own. Entrepreneurs like me don't need incentives. I'll take them. I mean, if you're willing, I'll move to Greece. It's beautiful here, I agree. Just pay me money to do it. But on the other hand, I wake up in the morning and I've got plenty to keep me busy. I know what I need to do. What I need is a place where I can live that is easy. I want it to be easy. I want to be able to pay my taxes. I want to be able to apply for whatever I have to do in order to connect to the internet or do whatever, and I want it to be easy. I talk to friends that live in Paris, and just getting a phone, just getting your water fixed, it's virtually impossible. In the United States, you'd lose your mind if your internet goes out for 13 seconds. If your cell phone call doesn't go through instantly, you move to a different community where the towers are better. there's a cultural mindset that opportunity matters. Greece just needs to push the idea that you have opportunity here, not the beaches. People can see those on their own. What we don't believe you have is opportunity.